guilty, but that's how it is. I'm sorry, but
Or maybe the Western Vancouver Island might get the rain, right near the
yeah,
Pacific.
northern part of the Vancouver
Yeah,
Island.
Vancouver.
What's happened to that Baha'I school you guys had on the Shawnigan Lake?
Yes, yeah, Maxwell School.
Yes, what was happened to it?
Yeah, some unfortunate stuff happened and they closed it. It was so sad because Ruhi Khanun came, right? She opened it up and I was there when she came. And it was such a fabulous school. People
You're
loved
talking about that Baha'I school for high school, like?
Oh, it was beautiful place. You could see the lake from each kid's rooms.
Yes, yeah. And it brought out, sent out a lot of wonderful kids out of that school. Really, really great school when it was going on. But I guess they had some problems with money and stuff. And unfortunate. It was very unfortunate.
Well, friends, in about 2 minutes, we'll start the program. This is our last session. And the devotional section is very special. It's very somber. The very first prayer of the devotional section is going to be the Tablet of Visitation of Abdul Baha, being recited in the original Arabic language. So for those who may not understand the Arabic, like me, I'm just explaining that this is what the first prayer is.
My mom's name is Liz. So.
I think we need to mute everyone, right?
Somebody's in the way. They need to honk to get him out of the way.
بلحظات أعيني رحمانية وتغمره في بحار رحمتي صمدانية أي رب إنه عبدك البائس الفقير ورقيقك السائل المتضرع الأسير مبتهل إليه متوكل عليه متضرع بين يديه يناديك ويناجيك ويقول ربي أيدني على خدمة أحبائك وقوني على عبودية حضرة أحديتك ونور جبيني بأنوار التعبد في ساحة قدسك والتبتل إلى ملكوت عظمتك وحققني بالفناء في فناء باب ألوهيتك وأعني على المواظبة على الانعدام في رحمة ربوبيتك أي رب اسقني كأس الفناء وألبسني ثوب الفناء وأغرقني في بحر الفناء واجعلني غبارا في ممر الأحبة واجعلني فداء للأرض التي وطئتها أقدام الأصفياء في سبيلك يا رب العزة والعلا إنك أنت الكريم المتعال هذا ما يناديك به ذلك العبد في البكور والآصال أي ربي حقق آماله ونور أسراره واشرح صدره وأوقد مصباحه في خدمة أمرك وعبادك إنك أنت الكريم الرحيم الوهاب وإنك أنت العزيز الرؤوف الرحمن عين عين
Alhamdulillah, al-Fawfu Mashura. Glad tidings, glad tidings, the morn of guidance hath dawned. Glad tidings, glad tidings, the sun of reality hath shone forth. Glad tidings, the breeze of favor hath wafted. Glad tidings, the raindrops of the cloud of bounty have showered. Glad tidings, the sun of the supreme horizon hath radiated to all the world with boundless effulgence. Glad tidings, the hearts are all in the utmost purity. Glad tidings, it is the splendor of His Highness Baha. Glad tidings, Zion is dancing. Glad tidings, the kingdom of God is full of exhilaration and commotion. مجتبى صف هداية السبيل مجتبى شمس حقيقة التأثير مجتبى نسيم الذي مجتبى فشعرت الصحاب عناوية طاري مجتبى شمس حرايا بالغار لا تقطع بل جميعها إسرائيل مجتبى قلوب تنزخاوية الصفا مجتبى تجلي حضرة البهاء مجتبى انجزاما ثم الأعلى مجتبى تحيون جرتان مجتبى ملكوت العافي والشور ولها
I love it, dear friends. My goodness, I don't know how to speak after that. What an incredible devotional. Thank you very much. Welcome to the third and final part of the 23rd Bluebonnet Baha'i Conference. This is February 20th, and it's a Saturday night. We're going to have we started with this unbelievable devotional. I'm still a little dizzy from it, so I apologize. I'm a little goofy. That was just a little intense there. But we're going to have a wonderful presentation tonight and a talk about our beloved master. We just heard his voice chanting for us, and we're going to have Mr. Bill Fernandez, who is going to talk about the example of Abdul Baha. We are going to have about a 45 minutes to an hour talk, as you know, and then any questions you have, you'd like to pose in chat, we'll be able to field them to Mr. Fernandez. So let me introduce, hello, Mr. Fernandez, how are you? So good to see you.
You too, greetings.
Greetings. I fully expected to see you in some sort of a black sort of turtleneck, Apple style, from your times at Apple.
I am
That-
a man of many talents and mystical persuasions. I can be anything you want.
So the reason I'm saying that is because Mr. Fernandez grew up in the Silicon Valley area. He was a childhood friend of both Steve Jobs and the Woz, Steve Wozniak, whom he introduced to each other. When they later founded Apple Computer, they invited Mr. Fernandez to join them as their first full-time permanent employee. For over 12 years at Apple, he worked on Apple I, Apple II, Macintosh computer, and HyperCard, which was a precursor to the World Wide Web, and QuickTime, which we all know is what brought sound and video to desktop computers. How exciting. I'm a Mac user. My husband said to me when we got married, Mr. Fernandez, come to the light. He made me, they're a very special breed, Mac users. And so this is very exciting to have you here. And you joined the Baha'i Faith at age 15. How interesting. Mm-hmm. You were a Homefront pioneer to save an assembly at age 21. You pioneered to Japan when you were 25, and he returned to America and became a Homefront pioneer again at age 44. So, and you currently live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He is the chair of the assembly there and is consulting on user experience, as well as he's a devoted husband and father. Mr. Fernandez, we're so happy to have you here with us. Thank you for making time for us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you very much. So here, we're going to hand over the reins to you for a talk on example of Abdu'l-Baha.
All right, we'll do our magical incantations here of sharing a screen. Figuring out what I want to do with the Zoom window, which has just moved to a different place and decides it wants to have its own behavior, not the one I want it to have. That's a user interface issue. That's what I consult on. Here we go. Good. That's good. Think we're all good. All right. Well, greetings. Thank you for being here. I always like to encourage people to take action, to change their behaviors, to transform their lives. So when I was asked to participate in this conference, I immediately knew that I wanted to talk about the example of Abdu'l-Baha. And I wanted to focus on practical examples that we could actually follow and that would have the greatest impact. While studying his life, I identified 5 major themes that I thought would be transformative if people followed Abdu'l-Baha's examples in these areas. These were also areas I thought would give the greatest impact given the needs of this current time and place. For each theme, I will first explain why I chose it. Second, I will present a few passages from our writings that illuminate that theme. Third, I will recount stories of Abdu'l-Baha, sharing some of the examples he provided. And finally, we'll consider how individual Baha'is could follow those examples and incorporate the theme into their lives. What it's not about. Let me say a few words about that. Most of the time when people talk about Abdu'l-Baha, they focus on how special he was, that he was the center of the covenant, the pivot of the oneness of mankind, the mystery of God. We're not going to do that because those are not stations that any of us can aspire to. Also, most of the time when people tell stories about Abdu'l-Baha, they gush about the effects he had on people, how he changed their hearts, how he impressed them, how they adored him. Again, we're not going to do that because today's talk is about how you should act and not about the results that you might or might not achieve. Finally, we will not dwell on what he exhorted us to do. You can read any of his books to learn all about that. This talk is about things that he did and how he chose to apply his father's teachings. So in a nutshell then, what this talk is about is to study the examples that Abdu'l-Baha provided that we ordinary mortals can credibly aspire to emulate. And if you leave today with the determination to follow even one of these examples, then I will feel that our time here has been well spent. So with that introduction, let us start with our first theme. Our first theme is devotion to the poor. I chose this theme because as I studied book after book about Abdu'l-Baha, I was struck by how much of his life was devoted to caring for the poor. It loomed so large in the stories about him and comprised so much of the fabric of his life that it became clear that devotion to the poor was a major theme in his life. It seems to me that if it's that important to him, it ought to be that important to us. Let's see what the writings have to say about that. Consideration shown to the poor is one of the greatest teachings of God. Well, that seems pretty important. Baha'u'llah says, bestow my wealth upon my poor. You can't get much more direct than that. Baha'u'llah again tells us that we should give to the poor by saying, tell the rich of the midnight sighing of the poor, to give and be generous are attributes of mine. Well is it with him that adorn himself with my virtues. And again, he says, the poor in your midst are my trust. Guard ye my trust, and be not intent on only your own ease. So in this passage, Baha'u'llah tells us that we have an obligation to God to take care of the poor. During a Yamiha, provide good cheer for the poor and needy. Now this is in the Kitab-i Aqdas. So for us, this is a law, just not a nice idea. Or not just a nice idea. Be ye loving fathers to the orphan, and a refuge to the helpless, and a treasury for the poor, and a cure for the ailing. Abdu'l-Baha literally did this, so much so that in Akka he was called the father of the poor. Be ye the helpers of every victim of oppression, the patrons of the disadvantaged. This, again, is what Abdu'l-Baha literally did throughout his life. Discussions of spiritual assemblies must all be confined to the relief of the poor, the help of the feeble, and a few other things. Here's Abdu'l-Baha telling the administrative order that care for the poor and sick is one of its primary obligations. Spiritual assemblies must do their utmost to extend at all times the helping hand to the poor, the sick, the disabled, the orphan, the widow. So here's the guardian repeating that same obligation for the administrative order. And here's Baha'u'llah saying essentially the same thing. Verily, we have made the house of justice a shelter for the poor and needy. So that's the end of the writings. Let's now look at the life of Abdu'l-Baha. And I'm going to leave this picture up while I tell you stories. Abdu'l-Baha lived very frugally. He wore cheap clothes. He usually only had one coat and one cloak. He slept on a mat. He ate very simply, often just soup and bread, maybe some fruit. He would walk almost everywhere instead of hiring carriages. Everything he saved through his frugality, he would spend on the poor. Once, when he had to travel from Akka to Haifa, he asked for a seat in a common stagecoach. The driver tried to talk him into a private carriage, but he declined. When they arrived in Haifa, a distressed fisherwoman came up to him. She had caught nothing and could not feed her family. The master gave her 5 francs and then turned to the driver and said, "You now see the reason why I would not take a private carriage. Why should I ride in luxury when so many are starving?" When one of his daughters was married, she wore only a nice but everyday dress. When Abdu'l-Baha was asked why she didn't have a wedding dress, he said, "My daughter is warmly clad and has all she needs for her comfort. The poor have not. What my daughter does not need, I will give to the poor rather than to her." He kept giving things away. If he came upon someone who needed a coat, he would give them his coat. If someone needed a bed, he would give them his bed. If a family was hungry, he'd take them his own family's dinner. His family sometimes to trick him. Once they secretly had a fine coat made for him. He found out about it and insisted they take it back to the tailor and trade it for several cheaper coats so that he would have some to give away. Once, after he'd given away his coat, they bought 2 and hid one so that he'd have a backup. He found out about the spare and insisted that it immediately be given away. At the time, late when he was living in Akka, there were about 600 persons living in poverty there. The only jobs were for those who could fish or could carry heavy loads. Many were sick or crippled. In Akka, Abdu'l-Baha was known as the father of the poor. Every Friday, hundreds of the poor would line up outside his house. He'd greet each one personally, giving them coins, solace, a pat on the back, a coat. Each winter, he'd arrange for a clothing shop to provide cloaks for a number of the poor, and he would place them around their shoulders personally. He also kept records of who got these annual cloaks and kept a sense of the persons who came to him for aid. He had a keen sense of justice and would not allow someone to abuse his generosity. He would spend the middle of his days visiting the sick and the infirm. One man became sick with tuberculosis. His friends avoided him, and even his family was fearful and hardly dared enter his room. When Abdu'l-Baha heard of this, he started going daily to the sick man, took him food, read to him, kept him company, and was alone with him when he died. A poor and crippled woman contracted measles and was shunned by her community. Abdu'l-Baha secured a room for her, sent her his own bedding, hired a doctor for her, sent her food and everything else she needed, and it was he who arranged and paid for her funeral. There was an old couple who were ill in bed for a month. The master visited them 20 times during that month. As there was no hospital in town, he paid a doctor a regular salary to look after the poor, and he instructed the doctor not to tell who provided the service. Louis Getzinger, an early American Baha'i, was on pilgrimage to Akka. One day he said to her that he was too busy to call upon a friend of his who was very poor and sick. He wished Louis to go in his place. He told her to take food to the sick man and care for him as he had been doing. Lua felt proud that Abdu'l-Baha had trusted her with some of his own work, but she soon returned to this Abdu'l-Baha in a state of excitement. "Master," she exclaimed, "you sent me to a very terrible place. I almost fainted from the awful smell, the dirty rooms, the degrading condition of that man in his house. I quickly left before I could catch some terrible disease." Sadly and sternly, Abdu'l-Baha gazed at her. If she wanted to serve God, he told her, she would have to serve her fellow man, because in every person she should see the image and likeness of God. Then he told her to go back to the man's house. If the house was dirty, she would clean it. If the man was dirty, she would bathe him. If he was hungry, she should feed him. He asked her not to come back until all this was done. Abdu'l-Baha had done these things many times for this man, and he told Louis Getzinger that she should be able to do them at least once. Even on his own wedding day, he did not take a break from caring for the poor. He arranged all the details of the wedding with great care and attention. He had a lovely ceremony conducted by his father. But then he disappeared, and he did not return until all the guests had left. He was on his daily rounds of caring for the poor and sick. On his travels to Europe and America, in London, he visited the Salvation Army headquarters on Christmas night. As the thousands of homeless people ate a special Christmas dinner, he spoke to them about how Jesus was poor, how it was easier for the poor to enter the kingdom of heaven than the rich. And upon leaving the warden of the shelter, he gave him money with which to buy a similar dinner for New Year's night. In New York City, before visiting the Bowery Mission, he had a 1,000-franc note converted into quarters. Each of those quarters today would be worth about $6. At the Bowery Mission, several hundred poor were there. He spoke to them again, pointing out that Jesus was poor, that the poor were the first to accept him, and so forth. He asked the people to accept him as their servant. After the talk, he stood at the mission hall entrance. He took each one in hand and placed in each a number of coins, the price of a bed for the night. At the end, there were only 80 coins left. When he arrived back at his apartment building, he encountered the chambermaid who he had previously given roses. Now he emptied all the remaining quarters into her apron, worth about $500 today, and then quickly moved on. Outside his inn in Dublin, New Hampshire, he met a man who was ragged and filthy. The master took his hand and smiled at them. They talked a while. Noticing the ragged state of the man's pants, the master laughed gently and stepped into a shadow. The street was quite deserted. He removed his pants, wrapped his robe around him, and gave his pants to the man. Throughout his travels to Europe and America, he maintained as much frugality as he could. He walked wherever he could, took streetcars rather than hired private cars. On overnight trains, he traveled in basic train cars and slept in the seats rather than paying extra for the special cars with beds. On the other hand, he always tipped generally and always acknowledged the staff and the servants. Upon leaving a home where he stayed, he would always meet with the staff and give them gifts and money. The care for the poor goes back to a young age. His sister, Bahia Kanum, says that for the poor, he always had a very tender heart. And destitute as they were during their banishments, he always contrived to find something to give to others who were in greater need. She says, "This almsgiving proclivity of my brother was a great trial to our mother, for in our straitened circumstances, she found it very difficult with the means at her disposal to provide for her family only those things that they are actually necessary." Abdu'l-Baha is our example. I didn't put us anything here. We're supposed to do what he did. He devoted much of his life to the poor, the sick, and the downtrodden. Why aren't we doing this? What are we missing? And what hidden consequences might we be suffering? I don't know, but these questions seem important. Let me take a drink of tea, and then we'll go on to our next theme, which is love and humility. Thank you. The next theme is love and humility. This spans the range from love all humanity with all your heart to ye were all created with the same dust and everything in between. As I studied the life of Abdu'l-Baha, I came to see how powerful a combination this is. It seems to me that if you can't love people and can't see them as equals, then you can't build unity with them. You can't build equality with them. You can't overcome and eliminate your prejudices against them. You can't productively consult with them. You can't weave a strong social fabric with them. And you won't be able to draw upon the spiritual power that comes from channeling God's love. You can't create a new world order just by yourself, so you're going to have to find a way to work constructively with others. And judging from Abdu'l-Baha's example, the foundation of this capacity is love and humility. Let's see what the writings have to say about this theme. O friends, you must all be so ablaze in this day with the fire of the love of God, that the heat thereof may be manifest in all your veins, your limbs, and members of your body, and the peoples of the world may be ignited by this heat and turn to the horizon of the beloved. That's Baha'u'llah setting a really big stake in the ground. Here's Shoghi Effendi saying, the cause of God has room for all. It would indeed not be the cause of God if it did not take in and welcome everyone, poor and rich, educated and ignorant, the unknown and the prominent. God surely wants them all as he has created them all. Abdu'l-Baha says, love ye all religions and all races with a love that is true and sincere, and show that love through deeds and not through the tongue. Baha'u'llah says, know ye not why we created you all from the same dust? That no one should exalt himself over the other. And since we have created you all from the same substance, it is incumbent upon you to be even as one soul, to walk with the same feet, to eat with the same mouth, and dwell in the same land. That from your inmost being, by your deeds and actions, the signs of oneness and the essence of detachment may be made manifest. The House of Justice tells us the Baha'i teachings call upon all believers to look upon all with loving kindness and compassion, and not to treat anyone with disdain. And at the end, we will take a look at what all includes and what anyone includes. Abdu'l-Baha says, it is your duty to be exceedingly kind to every human being. Let's see. And then he says of himself, even as dust upon the sacred threshold in utter humility and lowliness, Abdu'l-Baha is engaged in the promulgation of his signs. And finally, and I'm going to paraphrase this so that it reads easily on the slide, servant of the glory is my name, my qualification, my reality, my praise, my title, my commendation, my longing, my greatest yearning. Thraldom to the blessed perfection is my glorious and refulgent diadem, and servitude to the human race my perpetual religion. I am nothing else. I am the servant. For 24 years in Akka, there was a hateful Muslim man who execrated Abdu'l-Baha at every chance. He would shun him, he would avoid him in the passageways and so forth. He would speak out against him, and yet this man was poor. So Abdu'l-Baha would give him clothing, he would give him food, he would care for him when he was sick. For 24 years. Not for one, not for five, not for 10. He had many enemies. He had the government officials, he had the guards, he had the people of Akka who thought that he was a nasty, evil man, because that's what they had been told. There were people who were working against the faith and didn't want it to succeed. There were Muslims who felt that the Baha'is were bad and that we had to put them down. And to each one, he always showed love and care and acceptance and gentleness, tenderness. He helped them when they were in difficulty. He gave them advice. He paid money so that their children could be safe when they were in danger themselves. He was surrounded by people of his own family and some related and some Baha'is who were in their party who would become covenant breakers. And they made endless trouble for Abdu'l-Baha and for Baha'u'llah. And yet he always treated them with love and kindness and was very generous to them and never said an evil word against them. When there were times when pilgrims could come to the Holy Land, he would serve them with his own hands. He would sometimes cook the food. He would greet them as they came in, anoint them with attar of roses. He would seat them. He would serve the food to their plates and ask them, "Are you happy?" Once when he was in Switzerland, he came across one of the princes of Persia who was part of the family who had tried to kill Baha'u'llah, who had exiled Baha'u'llah, who had done so many nasty, bad things to the Baha'is. And this person said, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. And Abdu'l-Baha said, that's all in the past. He embraced them, he kissed them. He said, send me your sons. He spent time talking to his sons, and his sons were so touched by that. He said, let us go forth in harmony, let us go forth in love. In America, there was a man who heard about the faith when he was in prison, and eventually he got out of prison, and he heard that Abdu'l-Baha was in the country, and he was determined to see him. But he was poor. He didn't have money for the train. So he rode the rails like a hobo. He snuck onto the trains, climbed up to the top, or climbed into the bottom in the carriage underneath the car where the wheels were, and he rode 500 miles across country. And he arrived late at night at the house where Abdu'l-Baha was staying, dirty, smelly, greasy, tired, disheveled. And Abdu'l-Baha's hosts were going to turn away. But somehow Abdu'l-Baha knew. And he came out and he welcomed him. He hugged them. He embraced him. He greeted him. He said, it's so wonderful that you're here, and brought him in, and they talked. And later he took him to one of his talks, public talks, and later he took him in one of his rides that he took to another place where he had to speak. There was a woman in Chicago, when they were about to build the temple, and she wanted to make some contribution to the temple, but she was poor. So she wandered the streets trying to think, what can I do? And she came across a building site where they were building with, I believe, marble. And there were a lot of pieces of marble blocks sitting around that were rejects. And she saw one she liked, and she asked the foreman, can I have this? And he gave her, sure, that's a reject, you can have that. I have a picture of it that I took when I was at the temple. It's an odd looking thing. It's like a little cube of marble with a scoop out of it. Not at all an even stone. It's kind of odd. She borrowed a wagon from some kids, and she dragged it across town and brought it to the place where Abdu'l-Baha was there. They were breaking ground and dedicating the temple ground. And he welcomed her and praised her, accepted her gift with love, and called it the cornerstone of the temple. And it sits in the temple now in a little room with a story on the wall about this stone and about Neti Tobin, this woman, and about how this became the cornerstone of the Mother Temple of the West. Many of the American Baha'is at that time were also rich. And so they would try to put him up in nice houses. They would try to have banquets for him. They would try to introduce him to all of the most famous and powerful people of the various cities where he visited. This was also a time when there was a huge divide between the blacks and the whites that was in full swing. And there is, of course, one famous story that Richard Henderson recounted yesterday about how Louis Gregory was being turned away from this banquet. He knew that he wouldn't be let in, but Abdu'l-Baha saw him, brought him in, rearranged the little name tags on all of the seats around the table, got a place set for him right next to Abdu'l-Baha, and had him sit in the place of honor to the right of Abdu'l-Baha while he spoke of the integration of the races and the elimination of prejudice, and welcomed Louis Gregory and praised him as a Baha'i and a believer, a man at his side. Everywhere he went in America, he was very inclusive of Blacks and spoke whenever possible and whenever appropriate about the elimination of prejudice and the necessity of harmonizing the races. He was a person who didn't like ceremony and formality. In Akka, in Palestine after World War I, when he was awarded a knightship in the British Empire, they had arranged a carriage and they had arranged an entourage and a parade. And he kind of snuck around the back roads or back alleys and arrived on the stage at just the right moment for him to receive his award or receive his knightship. When he was at the Chicago temple site and they were going to dedicate the temple site, there was a trowel that people used to turn over dirt. And when it was Abdu'l-Baha's turn, they switched the trowel and wanted to give him a gold-plated one. And he switched it back and used the simple one, the undecorated one. He didn't like photos taken of himself, and he tried as much as possible to avoid that. He would tell people, don't take photos of me, and he very rarely allowed people to take formal portraits or anything like that. He said that, I don't want you to focus on the personality. I want you to focus on the teachings. I want you to focus on the spirit. He would do things like cook and serve his own birthday breakfast. He would make banquets for people where he cooked and served, the food on his own. These are all different ways that he showed both how loving he was and how humble he was. And that ends the stories and brings us to the reflection. I suggest that the all whom we must love with humility includes all these different categories of people who I so often see being disrespected, being pushed away, being disliked, being disapproved of, being judged, even within the Baha'i community. Us Baha'is, who are supposed to be so loving, so inclusive, and so humble, will look askance at someone who isn't dressed right, or who has a piercing, or has chosen that they need to be transgender, or as an old person, or as a person we don't like, a person who has given us trouble. Okay? And yet Abdu'l-Baha's example is that all of these people are to be loved, and that we have no right to judge them. That is not our place. That our place is to be humble before them. So that's how I'll end the section on love and humility. And the next section is going to be kind of interesting. It's called counterexamples. I'll have another sip of tea, and then we'll start that theme. So this theme is going to be a little different. We're going to look at counterexamples, behaviors that are part of the American culture and ethos that Abdu'l-Baha probably would not have practiced. I think we can learn from this contrast and perhaps undertake to clean up some bad habits. As I was learning about how Abdu'l-Baha handled various situations, I found myself more and more often being struck by how differently he handled them than most Americans would. As I reflected on these differences, I came to realize how many common practices that I just take for granted as a part of the American culture are at variance with the Baha'i teachings. It occurred to me that a very useful learning technique would be to notice when I do something that Abdu'l-Baha would not have done, then to study the Baha'i teachings on the topic and try to find a more Baha'i-like way to handle it. I've compiled a list of about 30 such behaviors and would like to present them each in the form of a question. How often did Abdu'l-Baha do this thing? You may feel a little sick at heart by hearing some of these. I suggest that the ones that make you feel sick are the ones where you already recognize their wrongness. And those that don't make you feel sick are perhaps the ones you need to study. Are you ready? Here we go. How often did Abdu'l-Baha look down his nose at someone? How often did he discount someone who was dressed poorly? How often did he refuse to deal with an inferior? Huh. How often did he discount the feelings of someone? How often did he ignore the needs of someone? All right, Zoom, please catch up. How often did he belittle the beliefs of someone? How often did he discourage someone? How often did he berate someone? How often did he call someone out on their failings? How often did he point out how someone didn't measure up? How often did he emotionally abuse someone? How often did he get into shouting matches? How often did he establish dominance over someone, whether it's physical dominance or academic dominance? I am the most degreed person in this room. Or maybe power dominance. I am the CEO. How often did he teach someone a lesson? How often did he put someone in their place? How often did he intentionally insult someone? How often did he call someone an idiot? How often did he disparage someone? How often did he talk about people behind their backs? How often did he complain about a public figure? How often did he make sick burns? Which, if you're young enough, you'll understand what that means. How often did he play a nasty prank on someone? Or a mean trick? How often did he gaslight someone? How often did he rationalize bad behavior? How often did he lie or cheat to get his way? How often did he get into fistfights? How often did he beat people up? How often did he beat people down? How often did he use force or violence to get his way? And if you're thinking, oh, no, Abdu'l-Baha would never do those things, well, that's true. But our media, our movies, video games, our entertainments are full of this in the American ethos. I will take it and take it and take it until I explode, and then I will use my strengths, my power, my weapons, my karate to just blast that guy out of existence. That is part of the American way. How often did Abdu'l-Baha participate in public protests? How often did he march in the streets? How often did he participate in riots? And how many times did he demand his rights? So often in life, I have heard Baha'is who want to live by the teachings ask, what would Abdu'l-Baha do? I suggest that it might also be useful to ask the question, can you imagine Abdu'l-Baha ever doing that? Okay, enough of counterexamples. Let's move on to the next theme, which is living in the kingdom. In this theme, we talk about living a life founded on spirituality rather than on physicality. A life where we view every event through our devotion to God rather than the material context in which it occurs. I was reading all these stories about all the terrible hardships that Abdu'l-Baha experienced, then reading his statement about how supremely happy he was through all of it. It made me think of the chaos currently sweeping our world and all the anxiety that it's causing in the Baha'i community. And it struck me that if the rank and file of Baha'is could do what Abdu'l-Baha did, it would be transformative. So I looked into this and identified the theme of living in the kingdom as the answer. Let us see what the writings have to say about this concept. The Blessed Perfection, Baha'u'llah, endured hardships and vicissitudes nearly 50 years. There was no ordeal or difficulty he did not experience, yet he endured it all in perfect joy and happiness. So it appears that Baha'u'llah was able to use this technique to be happy despite the hardships he endured. And here's Abdu'l-Baha, both teaching us the secret and telling us the result. I was in prison for 40 years. Thank God, during all those 40 years, I was supremely happy. Every day on waking, it was like hearing good tidings, and every night, infinite joy was mine. Now here's the secret. Spirituality was my comfort. Turning to God was my greatest joy. If this had not been so, do you think it possible I could have lived through those 40 years in prison? If material anxiety envelops you in a dark cloud, spiritual radiance lightens your path. Verily, those whose minds are illumined by the Spirit of the Most High have supreme consolation. Sometimes it sounds pretty mystical, and I don't really know how to achieve this, but it does sound pretty great, doesn't it? A man living with his thoughts in the kingdom knows perpetual joy. The ills all flesh is heir to do not pass him by, but they only touch the surface of his life. The depths are calm and serene. This has always been one of my favorite quotes. It clearly lays out the proposition that if you live in the kingdom, you'll be happy no matter what happens to you. This sounds like something we all need in this era of crisis and despair. So let's look at a picture of Abdu'l-Baha while I tell you some stories about how he lived in the kingdom. Honestly, this isn't something I understand. Clearly, I have a lot of personal growth to make in this area, but I'll tell some stories and see if you can figure out how it all works. Between Iran and Baghdad, Bahia Khanum says, "We were all insufficiently clothed and suffered keenly from exposure. My brother in particular was very thinly clad. Riding upon his horse, his feet, ankles, hands, and wrists were much exposed to the cold, which was so severe that they became frostbitten and swollen and caused him great pain. And yet he was supremely happy." Between Constantinople and Adrianople, Bahia Khanum says, "The journey to Adrianople, although occupying but 9 days, was the most terrible experience of travel we had thus far had. It was the beginning of winter and very cold. Heavy snow fell most of the time, and destitute as we were of proper clothing or food, it was a miracle we survived it. We arrived at Adrianople all sick, even the young and the strong. My brother again had his feet frozen on this journey. Yet he was supremely happy." Living in Adrianople, Bahia Khanum says, "Our family, numbering 11 persons, was lodged in the house of 3 rooms just outside the city of Adrianople. It was like a prison without comforts and surrounded by a guard of soldiers. Our only food was the prison fare allowed us, which was unsuitable to the children and the sick. That winter was a period of intense suffering due to the cold, hunger, and above all, to the torments of vermin with which the house was swarming. These made even the days horrible, and the nights still more so. When they were so intolerable that it was impossible to sleep, my brother would light a lamp, which somewhat intimidated the vermin, and by singing and laughing would seek to restore the spirits of the family. Yet he was supremely happy." Upon arriving in Akka, Bahia Khanum says, "When we entered the barracks, the massive door was closed upon us and the great bolts thrown home. I cannot find words to describe the filth and the stench of that vile place. We were nearly up to our ankles in mud in the room in which we were led. The damp, close air and the excretions of the soldiers combined to produce horrible odors. Then, being unable to bear more, I fainted. As I fainted, those about me caught me before I fell, but because of the mud and the filth, there was no place upon which I could be laid. On one side of the room was a man weaving a mat for the soldiers. One of our friends took this mat, and I was placed upon it. Then they begged for water, but they could not get it. Yet he was supremely happy." Bahia Kunum continues that the mothers who had babes at breast had no milk for them for lack of food and drink, so the babes could not be pacified or quieted. The larger children were screaming for food and water and could not sleep or be soothed. The women were fainting. Under these conditions, my brother spent the first part of the night in passing about the distressed people, trying to pacify them, and in appealing to the soldiers not to be so heartless as to allow the women and children to suffer so. About midnight, he succeeded in getting a message to the governor. We were then sent a little water and some cooked rice. But the rice was so full of grit and smelled so badly that only the strongest stomach could retain it. The water the children drank, but the rice only the strongest could eat. Yet, he was supremely happy. Bahia Kunum continues. The season was summer of 1868, and the temperature was very high. All our people were huddled together on the damp earth floor of the barracks with little water to drink, and that very bad, and no water with which to bathe, and scarcely enough for washing their faces. Typhoid fever and dysentery broke out among them. Every one in our company felt sick, excepting my brother, my mother, and aunt, and 2 others of the believers. We were not allowed a physician, and we could not procure medicine. My brother had in his baggage some quinine and bismuth, and with these 2 drugs and his nursing, he brought all of us through, with the exception of 4 who died. These were 2 months of such awful horror as words cannot picture. Imagine it if you can. Some 70 men, women, and children packed together, hot summer weather, no proper food, bad water, the most offensive odors from purging and excretions, and a general attack of the terrible diseases of dysentery and typhoid. There was no one with the strength to be of any general service but my brother. He washed the patients, fed them, nursed them, watched them. He took no rest. When at length he had brought the rest of us through the crisis and we were out of danger, he was utterly exhausted and fell sick himself, as also did my mother and the 3 others who had theretofore been well. The others soon recovered, but my brother was taken with dysentery and long remained in a dangerous condition. Yet he was supremely happy. The people of Akka were warned that these were terrible people who had done great evil, so the guards and the general population reviled them and persecuted them. Yet he was supremely happy. The governors kept changing, and each new one would start afresh the poor treatment of the Baha'is. The members of Baha'u'llah's family and their supporters, who eventually were declared covenant breakers, were a constant thorn in his side. They spread calumny against Baha'u'llah with the people and with the government. They made continuous efforts to undermine his authority. They tried at every turn to thwart Abdu'l-Baha's efforts on behalf of his father and fellow Baha'is. And yet, he was supremely happy. We'll stop here and go on to reflect. So there is a way to remain calm in the storm, to remain joyful in times of trouble. And in concept, it looks pretty simple. Live to your rest spiritual life. Look at everything through the lens of Baha'u'llah's teachings. Live in constant communion with God. Strive that day by day your actions may be as beautiful prayers. But it takes a huge amount of faith to turn away from reliance on material approaches to life and instead to place your trust in God. And once again, Abdu'l-Baha has given us the answer. As ye have faith, so shall your powers and blessings be. This is the balance. This is the balance. This is the balance. I will take another sip of tea, and we will go to the last theme, that of teaching the faith. And I will try to get my computer to behave correctly. There we go. Okay. Come on, little computer, you can do it. You can do it. Okay, there we go. Every Baha'i knows that we must teach the faith. Since I first discovered the faith as a youth, there's been an endless stream of messages filled with buzzwords such as teaching, proclamation, expansion, consolidation, direct teaching, indirect teaching, deepening, and entry by troops. But what does it all mean? What is it all for? And why did Abdu'l-Baha devote so much of his energies to this theme? Let's see if we can answer those questions. All the problems of the world are fundamentally spiritual in nature. Thus, the solutions to all these problems are fundamentally spiritual. The divine physician has provided the remedy. Our job as Baha'is is to convince the world to apply the remedy. And Abdu'l-Baha went to an enormous amount of effort to show us how to do this. Let us see how the writings say some of these very same things. Here's the Guardian saying that humanity will suffer until it accepts and applies Baha'u'llah's teachings. He says, must a series of profound convulsions stir and rock the human race ere Baha'u'llah can be enthroned in the hearts and consciences of the masses? And here's the Master saying that the suffering will continue until humanity accepts and applies Baha'u'llah's teachings. He says, these calamities will continue to happen until mankind has been schooled by hardship to recognize and accept the manifestation of God for this day. Here's Baha'u'llah saying that world peace is impossible until humanity accepts and applies his teachings. He says, the well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. But this unity can never be achieved so long as the counsels which the pen of the Most High hath revealed are suffered to pass unheeded. Here's the Universal House of Justice repeating essentially the same thing. The fundamental purpose of our faith is unity and the establishment of peace. This goal, which is the longing of people throughout an increasingly insecure world, can only be achieved through the teachings of Baha'u'llah. Here's where we shift focus. Now that it's been established that the world is lost without the healing message of the divine physician, we shift focus to the question of how to administer the cure. And it turns out only we can do it. And if we don't do it, it won't get done. Humanity will continue to suffer, and the world will continue to fall deeper into destruction and despair. The House of Justice says, since it is only the Baha'is who can give these teachings to mankind, the friends must weigh carefully how they will spend their time and energy. And here is a very beautiful passage from our own National Spiritual Assembly in the last feast letter. If we are truly concerned about the welfare of humanity, if our passion for justice is sincere, and if our belief in the power of Baha'u'llah to transform the world is genuine, the only course of action is unremitting, sacrificial, and united effort to further his cause. Here is our own National Spiritual Assembly so beautifully and lovingly putting to us the question, do we really care? Do we really want to change the world? Do we really believe in Baha'u'llah? If so, then how can we do otherwise than devote our lives to his service? Shoghi Effendi says about the Baha'is, in direct ratio to their success will be the protection vouchsafed not only to them, but to their country. So does the state of the world leave you scared and anxious? Do you want as much protection from tests as possible? Then here's the answer. We will be protected to the degree that we're successful in convincing humanity to accept and apply Baha'u'llah's teachings. The House of Justice says, there are hundreds of thousands of well-wishers of mankind who devote their lives to works of relief and charity, but a pitiful few to do the work which God himself most wants done, the spiritual awakening and regeneration of mankind. So, do you want to be one of the many who are putting patches on failing systems? Or do you want to be one of the few who are actually fixing the problem? Well, now that we've read some writings, let's talk about Abdu'l-Baha and his teaching. I've made this little chart, a timeline of some of the significant events in his life. During the time he was in Akka before his father died, he was struggling to keep the Baha'is alive. to make them comfortable, to get food for them, to get charcoal so they could have a fire in the winter, to get them clothing and so forth. The way he went about all these things were by living the life of a Baha'i, by being kind, by being fair, by being just, and so forth, while he struggled to do what needed to be done. Okay? And that was much of the first years. When his father died, he took on the mantle of leadership of the faith, and now he was responsible for carrying on his father's work. He wrote endless tablets over his ministry. I understand we have 19,000 authenticated tablets. He would pray in the morning, deal with the sick and infirm during the day, pray in the evenings, and then spend the late night writing tablet after tablet after tablet after tablet. His tablets fought the conniving of the covenant breakers, helped guide Baha'is who had no idea how to be Baha'is into being Baha'is, tried to keep them from making terrible mistakes, tried to lead them in promising directions, gave them the spiritual teachings they would need, gave them the encouragement. So many of his letters were written personally to people who wrote to him and needed help or advice. When pilgrims would come to the Holy Land, particularly the Western pilgrims, he would spend hours with them, answering their questions, teaching them, and so forth. It wasn't until he'd been in prison for 40 years that he was finally able, really, to leave the prison and to leave the Holy Land. And 2 years later, he started traveling and he started teaching around the world. He changed cities 83 times in those 3 years. He changed countries 20 times in those 3 years. At the age of 67, he gave his first public speech at a church in London. Let me give you an interesting chart of that. Yeah, no, there we go. Here's a list of all the places that he went. After years of deprivation, 40 years of deprivation and hunger and illness and so forth in the prison, at the age of 66, he traveled around the world to spread his father's message. He gave talks. He would meet people in the morning privately. He would have banquets. He would have luncheons. He would have dinners. He would meet people in the park. He would give talks in the evenings to hundreds or thousands of people. He would entertain more people as his Baha'i contacts brought people of prominence into his presence. And he answered all of them in whatever way was appropriate. For some people who came to meet him, he would just give them a hug and a flower. For others, he would just listen to their stories. For others, he would confirm that if you are a man of spirit, regardless of your religion, that you should do that. That's a good thing and you are a good man. You know, whatever was appropriate, he gave to those people in all the different ways. He taught in a variety of different ways. Let's see. At the beginning of this theme, we established what's at stake: the well-being of all humankind. And we established that there's only one path between here and God's kingdom on earth, and that is to teach the faith. Abdu'l-Baha demonstrated how to teach the faith in many different ways and in many different circumstances. How to teach through love, how to teach by listening, how to teach through giving solace, how to teach through acceptance, how to teach by example, how to teach by discourse, how to teach through service, how to teach through good works. Choose what's best for you and get to work. Well, that's all I have for you today. I hope you found it useful. If I have inspired you to take a serious look at your life and to deeply compare it to the example of Abdu'l-Baha and maybe do something meaningful about the differences, then I will be very happy. Blessings and love to you all. The end.
Thank you so much, Bill. My goodness, what a comprehensive and beautiful talk tonight. I don't think it's the end. I think it's the beginning. You gave us so many wonderful ways to think about it. Do you mind going back to your slides about counter examples? That I have
Sure.
never heard that. What a creative way to think about it, because we are always thinking, what would Abdu'l-Baha do? But you flipped it on its head, right? You said what he wouldn't do. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you came up with that idea and how did things make it to your list?
Well, basically what I said was that I was reading that Abdu'l-Baha would handle this situation. A person was angry, a person wanted to attack him, a person uttered calumny against him, was spreading rumors, was doing something bad. And Abdu'l-Baha handled it in the Abdu'l-Baha way. And I said, that's different than we would do it in America. That's different than what you'd see in movies or on TV or in commercials, or that's different than Chuck Norris would do it. You know, that's different than any of our politicians would do it. That's different than any of our titans of industry would do it. So, And then I realized that there were a whole bunch of things that we do that are not Baha'i-like that we just ignore. We say, that's life. That's, that's just the way things work in America. And then I realized that it would be very useful if we could point out these things so that I could say, I feel like I want to punch that guy, okay? And say, well, okay, would Abdu'l-Baha do that? No, Abdu'l-Baha wouldn't do that. So what would he do instead, okay? Or maybe I'm in a consultation and things are very heated and I really feel I have the right answer, I have the truth. And I really want to force everyone to accept my opinion. And I think, well, something's not right about that. Would Abdu'l-Baha do that? No. What's wrong with that? Why is that wrong? Why am I trying to do this? Okay. Gaslighting is something that's come into the American terminology over the past, decade or so, where you are labeling often what men do to women to say, no, you're wrong, it's not that. And that's a way of discounting and discrediting and shutting down another person by trying to convince them that what they know is true is not actually true. Okay. Let me go back and see. How many times do we just call someone an idiot? No big deal, right? How many times do we complain to our wife or to a person in at a feast about a public figure? No big deal, right? Everyone does it. Nah, I can't see Abdu'l-Baha doing that. Maybe that's not right. Maybe I ought to think about that. Okay. When people are contending with each other verbally, you try to make a zinger, an insult that really lets you win that round of the back and forth. You make a sick burn. Ooh, I really put you down. That was a good one. I schooled you,
that's what
buddy.
that means. That's what that means. Sick burn.
I schooled you. I taught you who's boss of this conversation.
I see.
That's a fundamental part, a common part of American culture.
Interesting. How would
Abdu'l-Baha do that? No, I don't think so. Okay.
So you're aligning it. So how would you, when we think about power and strength in the West, we think about control, force, and violence.
Yes.
Those are not things that you see in the person or life of Abdu'l-Baha. He wouldn't give in if something was wrong. But so how do you do that? I mean, in terms of you're a martial artist, right? You do you're black belt. So can you talk to us about using the force that comes at you? It seems like he was such a sort of ninja warrior of sorts, right? Like spiritual ninja, that he was able to take the energy that came towards him and redirect it in a way. He never met it head on.
That's amazing. You should couch the question in exactly that way, because this is one of my favorite things. I'm a second-degree black belt in a martial art. Kind of the core of the martial art is when someone is attacking you, you blend with it and join the attack. And then the attack becomes a dance where you are moving in harmony and unity. And once you are dancing together, you can lead the dance and redirect it in another direction. Now, the other direction might simply be to sit down, or it might simply be away from you, or it might be through a window so he goes crashing 10 stories down to the ground, whatever is appropriate. But you did that by blending with the attack, turning the attack into a dance, something that you could enjoy together before you redirect it in what you feel is the most productive way. And that was Abdu'l-Baha's method of teaching. I saw this beautiful quote that the Delight of Hearts told us, said, this is what Baha'u'llah said. He said, look at the way Abdu'l-Baha teaches. When someone comes in all excited and all intent about their way of seeing of the world, or what they think you should do, or whatever their opinion is, Abdu'l-Baha listens carefully, he joins them, he affirms them, and he gently turns the conversation around.
That's beautifully said. That is so wonderful. So this is a very challenging talk that you're giving us, because we have to truly examine ourselves, and we have to have such a high degree of accountability and truthfulness with ourselves. We know ourselves. So when we are looking at what would Abdu'l-Baha do, what would he not do? Would he actually not do this? And then how do we suffuse the teachings into our lives in a way that tries to get to this point? So what if somebody says to you, gosh, that's so idealistic, that Abdu'l-Baha, no one can be at that level. It's like a gold medalist. Like we know they exist, but none of us are gold medalists in anything. So how can we aspire to it? Is it that the aspiration itself will change us and transform us and transmute us into something else? Because none of us can become Abdu'l-Baha, clearly.
Oh, that's a fallacy to think that way.
Okay.
And the answer is very easy. You say, Abdu'l-Baha was perfect. I can't be perfect. Okay,
Right.
Abdu'l-Baha did like 1,000,000 things perfectly. But 1,000,000 is a lot. And I'll bet you could do this one. And she could do that one. And that guy over there could do this one. And I could do these 2 or 3. You don't have to be Abdu'l-Baha. You just have to pick one thing at a time and do that thing until you're good at it. And then do a second thing until you get good at that. And then a third thing until you get good at that. It's easy. It's hard. It's simple. Let's say it's this way. It's simple and it's hard. It's hard because you are challenging yourself to grow, to transform, to change your values, to change your outlook, to change your opinion, to change your way of acting, to change your belief about what is beneficial and what is not. If I give to the Hukuk Allah, how will I be able to retire? Something to think about. Baha'u'llah says it's good for you. And you're saying, yes, but I've been looking at my bank account and I'm not so sure. See, this is an instance where you have an opportunity for spiritual growth. And just thinking about the question seriously, even if you decide not to give to the Hukuk Allah, you have grown by asking the question and thinking about it. And you've taken a step down that very long path, following in the footsteps of Abdu'l-Baha.
And he does say, kam ruz be ruz, little by little, day by day.
Step by step, yeah, day by day.
And you can get there. So the yes, but is the challenge of on the spiritual path. Yes, I would love to do this, but I just can't, or but this is hard for me. So let's see, I think someone has raised their hand and would like to join the conversation. If we could please go to the gallery view so we could see each other as we ask questions, that would be awesome.
Sure, let me stop the share.
Thank you, and then there we go.
Welcome.
Let's see, Shir Mohammadi, I don't know the first name, they have their hand up. If we could please unmute them.
Allah Hafiz, Allah Hafiz, and thank you so much for wonderful gathering, and thank you, Mr. Bill. I think He's explained very friendly, and that's wonderful. I have a question. My question is, which book we can study? He suggested for us to have all the information he said about that Abdul Baha.
Well, I collected about 30 books, and I was actually able to get through about 20 of them. And some of them were booklets, so they weren't full books. But I would say Vignettes of Abdul Baha, which you can actually get online as a scan of the printed book, is a good one. Has a wide variety of things.
Can you say again? I want to write.
I'm sure we can also share, or we could put it in chat, Bill.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, why don't you put it in chat? It's vignettes is a French word, so it's got an odd spelling for Americans.
I'll find. Okay, keep going.
Thank you so much. And you explained very brilliantly and wonderful. You had put a question, and I'm very sad because I cannot come earlier, and I just want to prepare something. I had to.
Okay.
I cannot come earlier because
you only have to get one or two things.
That's right.
Yeah, but I think you put it in YouTube, your program, yeah?
Yes, it is being recorded and it is also streaming live. So the link will be sent to everyone. Thank you for your question. And we'll start putting some of the books in chat.
Thank you so much. Thank
you. There's a link to vignettes.
Sure. And it's a beauty for all of you.
Thank you very much. And then, Bill, if you could maybe send us a list of the books that you have in mind, if you have it, and we can share it with the friends, or if you want to mention a couple, however you like. Who is Yes, whatever you think is the right way to do this, because there's so many books, as you're saying.
The list is on another computer, and the list is a bunch of folders. Each folder references the book, and inside of a folder is each one of the extracts. So I'd have to copy all the names of the folders. Okay. I can send that to you later if you want, but it's not easy for. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Who is 1948? Maybe we could unmute them. 1948.
Yeah, I'm trying. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
1948. You have the floor. We unmuted you, and please go ahead. Please unmute yourself. Turn on your microphone. 1948, and please share your name with us. $1948.
Maybe accidentally touched it.
Okay.
Should we go to the next one, Khotanjan?
Yes, please. Mrs. Faride Azad, if we could please.
Okay. She's unmuted. I mean, she can unmute herself now.
Yes, kindly, if you could unmute yourself.
Miss Faride Azad, can you hear us?
It's challenging. If you wouldn't mind, please put it in chat if we can't hear you. There's some really wonderful thoughts are being shared with everyone. We just have a couple more minutes with Bill. What a wonderful presentation, so comprehensive and practical. Oh, I think someone was trying to clap and they raised their hand maybe. And then Ms. Azad says she cannot unmute herself. If there's any way to help her.
We're asking her to unmute herself.
Okay, she says she cannot unmute herself. Let's see. And then we have Salman who has his hand up. Go ahead, Salman John, unmute yourself while we work with Ms. Azad.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the wonderful speech. I really enjoyed it. I guess, I haven't formulated my thoughts yet or my question yet. But like one of the things about Abdul Baha was he mentioned that he wouldn't come to the US because it wasn't ready yet. The culture of the US was so materialistic and very individualist materialistic, like people mostly thinking about themselves. So I guess my question is, like, just, being in this culture, especially in the US, and trying to teach the faith, any, what I'm trying to say is, I guess, like, how should we approach this? Like, knowing that this culture is materialistic. What are things we need to be aware of, and how we can work towards that, I guess. That's what I'm asking.
Okay. Sticking with the theme of Abdu'l-Baha's example is, as you heard from Robert Stockman this morning, it was kind of crazy and chaotic in America early on. So Abdu'l-Baha would give them guidance that maybe wasn't the ultimate in what he wanted, but was as much as he could ask for at the time. And that's what he has done, and the Guardian has done, and the House of Justice has done. At this moment, what is practical? Tomorrow, what is practical? Next year, what can we aim for that is achievable? Organic growth, doing the next thing based upon what we've achieved, has always been the way. Because if the paradigm was, you get nothing until you give me everything, we'd be totally hosed. If you was to flip a switch, it's either the kingdom of God or you guys live in hell forever. We could never make that transition. We have to take little baby steps. We have to fail a lot. We have to experiment. Yeah. And then each time we grow to a new plateau, that enables us to do new things. And that's what the capacity building that the House of Justice has been honest about for the past 25 years is all about. Building the capacity so that we can do ever bigger, more important, more meaningful things.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. And there are questions about, could we please have the text of the talk by any chance? I assume there would be the recording of this talk as well as your PowerPoints. We could certainly share that out if that's okay with you, Bill.
Maybe after the conference, I can talk to Faris about what's appropriate and also, what, like my PowerPoint is like 100 megabytes, and you can't email more than like 20. Okay, so that's not going to work.
Well, the PowerPoint is part of the recording. It's included in the recording.
Yeah.
So.
Anyway, so we can talk about that, the logistics offline, and then you can decide what you want to share with the world.
Wonderful. Resources are always great. So yeah, thank you for that. Go ahead, Faris.
Ms. Farida Azad is unmuted if she wants to.
Oh, Ms. Azadi, you are unmuted.
Azad, Farida Azad. Okay, this is the question I have. When Bahia Khanum was talking about Abdu'l-Baha and how he was handling all the different tests and difficulties and severe challenges that none of us could imagine that a human being could experience and not lose their center, not become depressed, not become hopeless. She kept saying that, and he was joyful, and he was joyful, and he was joyful. So I just don't know how Abdu'l-Baha could do that. And what is it that we can do? Like, even if we choose one area of our life that is filled with tests and difficulties and severe hardship, and no one can help us. So maybe these severe tests and difficulties that we are experiencing, they're so severe that no one can help us. And we have to turn to God to get the help. So if spirituality was Abdu'l-Baha's comfort, how do we break that down? What does that look like? Like, what do each one of us, when we are faced with such severe tests and difficulties that we just feel like giving up, what does that mean? Spirituality is the answer.
Well, I don't have all the answer, but I have pieces of it that I feel confident in offering.
Go ahead.
is that it's not the result that is important. What is important is your personal decision. So whether or not you have huge tests or little tests is not important. What's important is, have you sacrificed your will to the will of God? Are you in a state of constant prayer with God? Are you serving God with every fiber of your being? And of course, there's a continuum. You're starting now and saying, not at all, I'm serving myself. You know, I'm eating ice cream, I'm cheating on my taxes, I'm collecting money, you know, at the expense of the poor and stuff. But this Baha'i stuff looks, you know, interesting. Okay. Now, you start from there and you say, well, what decision am I going to make to get to the point that I just said of complete self-abnegation, of complete self-sacrifice, of complete love for God? And there are many stages of that continuum of development. And Abdu'l-Baha says over and over again, lots of different guidance about it. Pray every day. Pray morning and night. Baha'u'llah says, pray so it means something, not just, you know, just check the time. Okay, I've done my 5 minutes of prayer. No, make a connection in your heart, a 5-second connection, a 10-second connection, a 5-minute connection. That's what Baha'u'llah says to do. And do more and more and more of that. Each one of those things builds this connection with God, builds this prayerful state, builds this God-centered life. And the more and more you do, little by little, step by step, day by day, it builds until things that you are today are enormous obstacles are little pebbles in your path tomorrow. That was my life as a Baha'i. When I first became a Baha'i at about age 15, I would see enormous obstacles. And then as I practiced the Baha'i faith, I'd realize, that's like sand in the bath. It's not an obstacle at all anymore. And I realized that I was handling bigger and bigger challenges with less and less stress. And I attribute it all to my efforts to try to be more Baha'i-like little by little in my life. So
wonderful. Thank you so much for that great advice. Very practical, very spiritual, walking the spiritual path with practical feet. So important. Thank you, Bill, for this. Really, it has so many levels to this presentation. And I think we're going to be processing that for a long time. So we're so grateful for you coming here, for sharing your insights. Thank you very much for that. Really appreciate it. Dear friends, we need to now shift over. I'm going to see where our dear friend Seamin Venus is. And Bill, people are sharing their love for you in chat. I know you've been very focused on the presentation. You may want to peek in there and see how much you're loved and appreciated. So, and then also, friends, the link in there for the streaming and the YouTube channel, all of that, Mr. Javeri has put it in the chat for you. Seamin John, this is the last session.
Yes. Yes.
And it's so wonderful.
It's wonderful. I want you guys to be jealous because Bill lives in my city and I see him often.
And thank God for COVID. We get to see him with you, share him with you. So thank you very much for sharing Bill with us. And we have two amazing artists tonight again. The day has been amazing and it keeps building and building. So please introduce our dear friends.
Absolutely. It's an honor for me to introduce our next presenter for the music. He doesn't need that much introduction. He's world renowned. His voice coming through the walls of the Mashghul Askar of Chicago, the Ummul Ma'abed of the West, brings calm and tranquility to the hearts. He is also the conductor of the Baha'i National Choir. And here is Mr. Van Gilmer. Please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to be here. As I was listening to Bill, I changed my song. I changed it to be more related to Abdu'l-Baha. When he came here in 1912 and went to New York, he went in a church and they were playing a Christian hymn, but the hymn was Nearer, My God, to Thee. And so I'm going to sing that instead of the song I was going to sing. Nearer, my God, to Thee. Nearer, my God, to Thee. Nearer, my God, to Thee. Nearer to Thee. Nearer, my God, to Thee. Nearer to Thee. Even though it be a cross that raiseth me, still all my song shall be nearer, my God, to Thee. Nearer, my God, to Thee. Nearer to Thee. I neglected to tell you that as he heard this song playing, he threw away what he had come to speak to the congregation about, and he talked about being nearer to God. So I'll sing one more verse. Nearer, my God, to Thee. Nearer to Thee. Even though it be a cross that raiseth me, still all my song shall be nearer, my God, to Thee. Nearer, my God, to Thee. Nearer to Thee. Nearer to Thee.
Thank you, Van. Thank you so much. I would like to, Van, do you have another one for us or? You're mute.
Oh, okay, yes, I do have another.
Please, thank you.
Prayer for healing. He is the healer, the sufficer, the helper, the all-forgiving, the all-merciful, exalted one, O faithful one, O glorious one, thou the sufficing, thou the healing, thou the abiding, thou the healing, O thou abiding one, I call on thee, I call on thee, I call on thee, O thou abiding one, I call on thee, oh my God. The sufficer, the helper, the all forgiving, the all merciful. I call on thee, O exalted one, O faithful one, O glorious one, thou the sufficing, thou the healing, thou the abiding, thou the healing, O thou abiding one, I call on thee, I call on thee, I call on thee, O thou abiding one, I call on thee, I call on thee, I call on thee, O thou abiding one, I call on thee, oh my
Thank you so much, dear Mr. Gilmer. We really appreciate. Friends, our last leg of the musical performance is our beloved Sam Venus. He's been sitting and waiting with his guitar, and I am not going to spend that much time in introducing him. He performed for us yesterday and everybody loved it. And here he is. I would like for him to explain about his music and what is he going to do himself. Go ahead, Samjan.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for having me. Before I just say anything, I just want to thank Bill. I loved your talk, so uplifting. It really made me think how I can be thinking about Abdul Baha's life more in my life. And Van, thank you, that was beautiful. I love listening to you. I was feeling a little bit nervous before playing, but that kind of cleared it all up, so thank you. So I usually play flamenco and classical, and recently I've been experimenting with some tapping stuff as well. So I'll be playing 5 pieces for you guys today. The first of which is a classical piece, and it's called Andantino. Thank you, thank you. This next song I'm going to be playing is of the flamenco variety. It's in flamenco we have many rhythms, and I explained a little bit yesterday, but I played a buleria last time, and that was in a 12 count, and this is known as a fandango. This is also in a 12 count, but a little more free form. And this is my improvisation on it. That was the second piece. Thank you. And the next song I'll be playing is a tapping. I guess not tapping, but this one also doesn't have a name, just like a lot of the songs last time. But it's basically just me tapping on the guitar and playing various chords, and then improvising and see what I can come up with. Thank you. That was the third song. And the fourth song I'll be playing is it's from a famous guitarist known as Paco de Lucia. He passed away not too long ago, but many consider him to be the greatest flamenco guitarist of all time. And for me, I draw a lot of inspiration from him whenever I heard him play. Of course, I wasn't alive that much, but whenever I hear his songs, it's truly inspiration. I aspire to hopefully try and play like him one day. This one's called Entre Dos Aguas. That's the fourth song. Thank you. And the final song I'm gonna play is called Tormentas de Fuegas. It's very flamenco, very Spanish sounding, and it's got a lot of nice rhythms, and it's one of my favorites. guys for listening to me.
Bravo. Thank you. Bravo. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Please, everybody, unmute yourselves and give a round of applause for him. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Gilbert.
Thank you so much.
sir.
Thank you so much. If I may, I usually like to keep things on a light mode, but seriously, my deepest gratitude and appreciation to each and every one of these performers, because when I asked them, without hesitation, each and every one of them accepted, and I truly thankful to them. Thank you so much to all of you for everything you did. Thank you.
How lovely.
Thank you.
Thank
Well,
you. Thank you,
really
John,
Friends,
for coordinating this.
Mr.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Faris.
Mr. Jabir, can you mute everybody, please, for just a moment, please? Thank you.
I think he meant not to mute him. Yes,
no,
Faris.
not the MC. We have a raised hand, Ms. Faiza Golkar.
Yes.
Ms. Faiza Golkar, did you want to share something with us, please? Ms. Golkar?
It may have been just like clapping.
Accident.
That was the accidental. Yeah. But Siminjan, thank you so much for coordinating this amazing part of the program without which it would not be complete, which is the artistic expressions, and so lovely. It was Van Gilmer is just incredibly transcendent. Van, you keep reaching higher and higher to Apa Kingdom, and we keep reaching higher with you. So thank you for taking us. And oh my gosh, Sam, I don't even know what to say. His Khales, Fariba and Khalejila are very proud of him. I saw in chat, and we are very proud with his Khales, with him. Sam, my goodness. And maybe we could put Van on as well with us, if it's possible to add his video. Aziz Ahmad, go ahead and unmute yourself. Van, you're muted as well. Thank you, Van. That was, I have no words for what you did for us. It was such a prayer you did. Oh my God, we adore you.
Thank you.
You always move us so much. Thank you, Van.
Well,
thank you.
Friends, thank you so much. We're at the bottom of the program. We have had 2 days together. We have one more raised hand. I'd like to give that Mr. Saeed Yazani a chance to share with us whatever thoughts he has. Please make it brief. Mr. Yazani, Saeed Yazani, go ahead. You have the floor, please. But you need to unmute yourself. Okay. Friends, thank you to every one of you for coming and sharing these 4 sessions of the program with us. It's all about you. You made it possible. So the first round of appreciation and gratitude goes to all of those who attended the conference. We are sorry that we were not able to be at your presence in person, considering the circumstances, and we had to do it online at a Zoom session. But the good thing about it is that we always have audiovisual problems and recording when we are live sessions. And here, thanks to Zoom, we're going to have this recorded for the first time. We have it hopefully flawless. I'd like to start by thanking all of those who made this conference possible. We look forward to next year, in February of next year, to be able to be in your presence in person and be of service to you. I'd like to start by thanking the Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of San Marcos, Texas, for sponsoring this conference. And Jeff Kester, the chair of the LSA of San Marcos, who was with us throughout the sessions, and he delivered the address of the on behalf of the LSA to the entire conference. Thank you, Spiritual Assembly of Baha'is of San Marcos and Jeff Kester. I'd like to thank the speakers we had, Dr. Robert Henderson, Bob Henderson, from the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States, Dr. Jenna Khadem from Michigan, Mr. Bill Fernandez from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Mr. Robert Stockman from Indiana. Thank you to all of you. We go to the music session. Of course, we have to start with Ms. Simin Venus, who worked with us from the beginning and arranged for all the musical sessions. Thank you, Ms. Venus. In alphabetical order, thank you, Babak Aghdassi. He's a very strong vocalist. Hopefully in the future, we can also listen to him performing some songs for us. Thank you. We have Ms. Erfania Aghdassi from Canada. By the way, Babak Aghdassi was from also Albuquerque, New Mexico. We had Ms. Erfania Aghdassi from Kingston, Canada. Thank you. Ms. Cathy Evogli from Spain. Mr. Van Gilmer from Wilmette, Illinois. Mark Ocho from Minnesota. And Sam Venus from Sacramento, California. Thank to every one of you for indulging us and being with us. Of course, I have to thank Ms. Khotan Shahbazi Harman for being such a wonderful, effective MC and running the whole program for us. Thank you, Khotan John. This is the second year you have done this. And I pray to God that you will do it for another 100 years for us. Of course, we have to thank the two gentlemen behind the scenes, Mr. Ali Jaberi, who also from the beginning was with us, and he arranged for the whole thing, the streaming of the program, the recording of the program, all the technical parts of it was really Mr. Ali Jaberi's work with his friend that he brought without us knowing, spontaneously, Mr. Hamed Khojastegan from Turkey. So we have people from all over the world helping us here, which we really, truly appreciate. I just wanted to this appreciation for everyone. I'm sure we will have letters of commendation and gratitude coming from the Spiritualist and Sponsoring Assembly to everybody. But I just want to take this opportunity at this last moment, thanking everybody. We love seeing you. I love seeing you. And I hope that God gives us another year so we can see you one more time in this world.
Thanks, John. Oh my goodness. And you know, on behalf of everyone who is watching at home and wherever they are, all of us here, we're from all over the place. We're from New Zealand, Philippines, UK, Germany, Canada, US here tonight. We want to thank you for really spearheading and your leadership in bringing this conference together. You call and say, can you do this? Before you hang up, we all say yes, because you're asking, Faris John. So thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you. I also need to thank the Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Round Rock, who started this conference 23 years ago, and then handed the baton to the Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Williamson County. And for a few years they did that, and now it's the Spiritual Assembly of Baha'is of San Marcos. So they all have had parts in making this event possible. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So is everyone happy? Are you feeling energized?
Yes.
Are you feeling good? Is your heart, has it expanded? Do you see
very impressed with the presentation, and it's a spiritual upliftment that I can carry on for another months.
Oh, how wonderful.
At least.
So please share your gratitude from your heart in chat so that everyone can see and get connected with you.
Sure,
and
indeed.
we
Thank
can
you
see
so much.
a friend said they're also here from Australia. So
yeah, I am from Australia.
You're Australian.
Yes.
You're New Zealand, and you said Australia is also here. So thank you for being here. Dear friends, thank you for, gosh, at this time of great change and uncertainty, and it's only February, and look where everything is happening this new year. What a bounty to be together. And
I have already received a contract from Embassy Suites Conference Center for 2022, 2023, and 2024.
Of course you have. Paris has planned this out for 10 years.
Well, I had to make sure the dates are reserved for us because that place is very much in demand and it's difficult to get space. So really looking forward to seeing all of you in person next year.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone. Allah. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
You all open your microphones. Now it's time to
just hang out.
Make noise.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
خیلی ممنون. دستتون درد نکنه. عصرتون با جمال مبارک.
مرسی. Thank you very much.
همه جمال مبارک باشید. همیشه همه جا.
Thank you so much.
خیلی عالی بود برنامه‌تون. خیلی عالی بود. مرسی. خیلی ممنون.
Thank you so much. روز همه بخیر. خداحافظ. مرسی.
جمال مبارک نگهدارتون باشه همیشه تو همه جا.